among academics. I mean,
it arouses terrible fear, I suspect.
I would agree, because I think people who do not identify with it or scoff at it have that certain sense of, why do you enjoy that? And because they don't understand how they themselves don't enjoy it, so that would bring up the feelings of fear or anxiety because they don't understand it.
Oscar Wilde. You want to be in society, he would say, but on the other hand, who would want to be rubbing shoulders with these snobs at the same time? He was ambivalent about this kind of, and it's been commented on a lot. And Tolkien's own hobbits, well, they're queer folk over in that other valley there across the river there. Right. I think we just have to sort of fight these things through. Unfortunately, it kind of waxes and wanes, and it's a bit of a comedy, of course, and you have to just kind of expect it most of the time. You're not going to get it delivered on a platter. You're going to have to fight for credibility. And I mean, ask Professor Shippey, who's been speaking on this kind of thing for a long time now. He doesn't suffer fools gladly, and he just welcomes these kinds of lame criticisms of Tolkien, which are completely uninformed. Usually, they don't read the book or really know what they're talking about. But it just sort of makes it almost an easy target. And it's too bad I guess you're just missing out on something wonderful. But hey, it's your choice.
Yeah, no, and that's the thing. It's one of the things that drives me craziest among my colleagues, is when it comes to Tolkien in particular and fantasy in general, I have heard other English professors condemn it while in the same breath confessing they've never read it. And I'm just thinking, about almost anything else, they would be ashamed to say that. I mean, what English professor would say something like, "Now, I've never read Lord Byron, but I think he's terrible." I mean, you would be ashamed to say that. I mean, perhaps you wouldn't be ashamed to say I don't read Byron, but you would say I'm going to reserve judgment or something. But the sort of the complete unself-consciousness with which people will confess both their complete ignorance and their violent condemnation, I can't even comprehend it.
It sounds like a modern congressman. I haven't read the bill, but I approve of it.
Yeah, well, it does seem something like some kind of a cultural party line. I mean, it's like a cultural affiliation rather than any kind of actually articulated position. And this I have to say, sort of thinking about it from the other angle and as sort of from the positive side, it's one of the things that I have always really admired about Tolkien. I mean, when I first started reading Tolkien, I found, of course, I really loved his stories, and I was really drawn into his books and into his whole world. But the more, I read of him, and the more that I have read him and studied him over the years since, the more I have come to admire him for exactly how willing he was to think through those things and actually articulate them. It's one of the reasons why I love On Fairy Stories so much. It's, it's a long and rambling essay, but he is willing to ask the hard questions and really think about it. There and in his poem Mythopoeia, where he's really considering, willing to stop and say, okay, what is this stuff really about? Why is this stuff important? Why is it, in fact, not only okay, but actually urgent that we, be willing to do this and be willing to think about these things? He and C.S. Lewis both were not afraid to look at these things and ask these questions that it just seems so many modern people are not even willing to ask those questions. But he did, he looked at this unblinkingly and really, articulated his position in ways which I think are really admirable.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yes. It's a wonderful subject to deal with. So many. I mean, I can think of parallels in art. Recently, was having a bit of a laugh because there are incredible pretensions in modern art, it seems, and yet, as much as I feel, the guys who do realistic work or who do kind of more traditional style art, which of course people like, they love, and they keep selling and buying this stuff. It's very popular. I mean,
right.
Yet, there's sort of this big divide between the ordinary person's taste and interest and this realm of very high, abstract and strange and wonderful modern art. I try not to judge that stuff and dismiss it this with the same prejudice on the other side that they would dismiss what they considered outmoded, old-fashioned, or whatever irrelevant styles of art. But you do encounter this kind of thing, and the kinds of artist statements that are trotted out to explain the importance and profoundness of what anyone can see is just beyond weird, and like you need to have it explained to you, because there's no way your normal senses would pick up or recognize the supposed importance and profoundness of it. But it is the emperor's new clothes, and I mean, I think that kind of principle, yes, continually revisits and reinvents itself all the time, and it must have a sort of place in the scheme of things, I guess. I don't know. It's like we keep needing to run up that set of stairs and fall down at the other end again. Sort of a M.C. Escher-esque, kind of procedure.
Right.
I don't know.
Right.
And I guess we need to cling to our prejudices to some extent too. And I guess what is good is being at least willing to examine those things from time to time and decide, if you're making a bit of a fool of yourself or not. And check yourself a little bit now and then, but I think there's a lot of people who just kind of give up on that at some point and just like, I'm what I am, I can't change, and I'm just going to dismiss anything I don't understand or particularly like. And that's that.
Yeah, no, and I actually think back to John's earlier discussion of a movie on Tolkien's life. It's so easy when people do learn a little bit about Tolkien's life. It's easy to kind of pigeonhole Tolkien as this like crotchety old guy who hated progress and hated industrialization and didn't want a refrigerator and all these other things, and it's so it's easy to create this really sort of false image of this guy who is just like, I am anti-progress, I am anti-technology, I am don't talk to me about any of this modern junk. Exactly. But of course, he thought pretty carefully about most of that. I mean, was some of that prejudice? Yeah, I'm sure some of it was prejudice, but not all of it was, and much of it, people don't give him credit for actually sort of there were some good reasons why he was resistant to the direction that modernity was going and resistant to the advance of industrialization. And I think that he really is, I think, a very interesting example of somebody who was both, willing to, as you say, Ted, to really sort of examine things and think about them, but yet also really willing to stand against them and to take some pretty unpopular stands about things as a result of his own analysis of them.
And he was a human being, and his opinions changed. He didn't always say exactly what he believed. In some cases, I think he liked to keep people guessing as well. And that's something you sort of start to notice after a while, that, he's having you on. This is part of the fun.
And in some cases, he would later say, I didn't say that.
Right. Yeah, or times when he's clearly...
What was that thing George Bush said? You misconstrued... What was that?
Yes.
Something... Anyway, never mind. Invented words.
Yeah, he was...
Misremembered.
He misremembered.
That's right. Yeah, I mean, Tolkien would also sort of deliberately say things kind of provocatively and kind of overstate his case deliberately, and
see if you're paying attention. This is a professor, and you would know this. You throw things out there just see if anyone is waking up. Or...
Yeah, exactly. No, I've been at this very long, and there's still a bunch of times where students will come back to me and say, "Well, in class you said this," and I'll be like, "I did? Why would I say that?" But yeah, it happens.
There's a land, there is a country, full of wonder, full of play. Only children hear its music, only they have found the way. There's a shore and there's a harbor that's too distant to our mind, because often now the nearest place is the hardest one to find. lantern that is darkness to the lost. With suspicion it's regarded, it cannot melt this frost. There's a light, there is a radiance, and it's right before our eyes. But only eyes that open can see and recognize. Have you found the treasure that the foolish ones call worthless, or the beauty that so many now ignore? Have you made discoveries on a path that's seldom traveled? Have you found the secret key to the hidden door?
That's all for part 1. In part 2, John, Ted, and I will respond together to questions from listeners and fans. Thanks for listening.